This episode of Fire Engineering Podcast is sponsored by LogRX, providing real-time accountability of all your narcotics from cradle to grave. Coming soon, LogRX will also track medical supplies, equipment, PPE, and even vehicle checks. Learn a better way to track your narcotics at logrx.com. That's LOGRX.com.
Like a trusted turnout jacket you've had for years, Flex 7 outer shell fabric delivers a perfectly broken-in feel on the very first wear. Flexible, comfortable, and powered with the strength of enforced technology, Flex 7 outer shell fabric is made to move. To learn more, visit tencatafabrics.com/flex7. Flex 7, powered by enforced technology. Only from TenCate Protective Fabrics.
Greetings and welcome to the Women in Fire radio show. Today we're going to be talking with a group of instructors and presenters that will be presenting at our international conference that's going to be held in SanDiego. I'm Lisa Baker, the Southwest Trustee for Women in Fire. And like I mentioned, we're going to highlight some of our conference speakers at the upcoming Women in Fire International Conference being held in SanDiego, September 11th to the 14th. We have 4 days of great classes as well as fun networking events. Opening ceremonies will take place on Friday, September 13th with two amazing speakers, Mesa Fire Chief Mary Camilli and Prince George County Fire Chief Tiffany Green. Beginning on September 11th, we're also offering hands-on training at the SanDiego Training Grounds. Hands-on training will also be on Thursday, as well as 4-hour workshops at the Host Hotel, the Westin SanDiego Gaslamp Quarters. So welcome to my guests. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today to talk about your classes. So Travis, do you want to start out first and tell us what class you're, give us a little background, bio of yourself, and then what class you're teaching and the reason you wanted to teach a class and the benefits that people attending your class would get from the class?
All right, I'll be glad to. I'm Travis Ford, retired out of the Nashville Fire Department and currently the Executive Officer to the Chief of Fire in Richmond Fire and Emergency Services in Richmond, Virginia. I'll be speaking this year on leading from where you are. And basically, leading from where you are will actually help you answer some fundamental questions about just your current leadership ability. So if you're a person that actually wants to make a positive or have a positive impact, not just in your department, but on your crew, on your shift, just learning to lead better will help you achieve that. And I think the big thing to know that, leadership's a process and it's not necessarily a position. So the challenge really for leadership is really how to create change and facilitate growth in your crew and those around you. And so if you're looking to advance your team and advance yourself, the class that I'm speaking on, leading from where you are, will actually help provide you a roadmap to get your leadership from where you are currently, but more importantly, help you to get it to where you want it to be. That's my short and sweet.
Okay. So you said it's leading from where you are. So people that you don't necessarily have to be a company officer to attend your class, right? You could be a firefighter or engineer or even a paramedic that wants to learn how to lead correctly.
I think that's the most important aspect, because most people get tied into positional leadership. And if you're relying on your position to move people, you're going to really fall far behind. But it's also important to know that even if you're new on the job, it's important to learn how to lead yourself properly, but also those that you work around. So you don't necessarily have to title in order to make a difference in and around the job and those individuals that you work with each and every day. It's very important to know that, because most people wait until they make lieutenant, captain, or whatever, or some people even wait till they make a battalion chief or higher in order to start making decisions. But your first day on the job, you're making a decision. So it's important for individuals to learn how to not only navigate that process, but just know that it is a process, and it's a daily process, and it does not occur overnight. It's almost like you're investing in yourself, investing in your leadership development. And it's almost like putting money in the bank. It takes time for it to compound, and it's a daily process. So the more you put in, the more you get out. And we're going to cover different aspects of that. So people will kind of have a roadmap of where they're at currently and all those individuals that they actually work around, and then where they can go from there if they choose to. Because some people, once they get to a certain level, they choose not to go up any higher. But they'll still have a roadmap to have a positive impact, not only in themselves, but also in others around them.
That's a good point that you made, just like putting the tools in a toolbox for when you need them. Like, so a new firefighter comes in, and I think some new firefighters kind of fall under the antage of listening to the group think of you shouldn't be taking these kind of classes if you're only a firefighter and such. But I mean, I think we've all probably heard that your reputation starts the minute you step foot on the training division ground. So taking classes like this, I would think, as a new firefighter, is only going to help you better prepare just to be a firefighter as well, because we've all heard the term informal leader, and you kind of spoke about the informal leader and such. So I think your class would be good for anybody at any progression of their career to take.
It will also help an individual out early on in their career to recognize those individuals that they should be around and those that they should not be around. Sometimes everybody thinks that's easy to say, but sometimes people put on a facade for 24 hours, and you really don't get the true individual if you're only with them for a shift or two. But shift after shift, eventually their true behavior will come out.
That's true. Melissa, do you want to, does anyone have any questions for Travis? Okay, Melissa, you want to go
Thank
next?
you.
Oh, no, thank you.
Thanks, Travis. Hi, everybody. My name is Melissa Lawlor. I am really excited to be presenting at Women in Fire SanDiego in September. I'm really looking forward to this because we got some major stuff that we're going to be doing and launching out, and it's going to put advocacy for women's health out in the forefront. So I'm like really looking forward to that. My background is 32 years volunteer fire EMT. And then I'm currently serving as a fire commissioner. I'm in my 5th year of that. And then professionally, my role is certified nurse midwife, family nurse practitioner, and I am also a lactation consultant. And then I am was appointed in the last few months as the first role in New York State for Deputy County Coordinator of First Responder Health and Wellness. So I've got like big shoes to fill on that. I am really excited what we're going to be doing for you in the classes that we're doing with John, Elisa, I'm sorry, I mispronounced her name. And Maya, you'll be talking to her, and then also Brittany Hollerback. We're presenting to you reproductive health for women in the fire service and what this means to you as a firefighter. And so it'll you're going to learn a lot of facts and what the new current research is for women in the fire service as well as men, because it doesn't just affect one of us, it takes two, and what that means for you as a woman and how to be able to take care of yourself better, and also how to advocate for yourself. And then my role, which is I feel so lucky that I get to do this because I'm able to take what I know as a midwife and what I can bring to the table for that as a and also a family nurse practitioner, and bring that forward as to what that looks like for you as a firefighter in connection with the newly launched Pregnancy Worker Fairness Act and accommodations and all the things. So I'm really looking forward to doing that.
And actually, Melissa, you and Brittany and Mia were part of the Women in Fire, the leadership conference with the reproductive health mentoring program that we had the afternoon
was-
session.
Yeah.
And if your class is anything like that, it's going to be a fantastic class. They're very, very informative. They speak from the heart, and so they've all been there, especially Mia. So they're speaking from their own experience, kind of what happened when they were pregnant and such in the fire service. So it was a good class.
Yeah, that was out at FDIC, which
Yeah.
that was amazing. And then I went out and talked about reproductive health in Phoenix for the Women in Fire Leadership Conference in Mesa, and talked to Chief Mary Camelli. She puts on one heck of a show, and that conference was one of the most, I came back from that feeling like so it's going to be cliche, but on fire as a woman in in leadership position. Like, it really was amazing just being around all these other women in that room, and they're in leadership positions, whether they're brand new on or if they've been there for 40 years, you're serving in a leadership position. So
John, do you want to go next? Because your class kind of correlates a little bit with your and Alyssa's class kind of correlates a little bit with what Melissa just spoke about.
Sure, but the first thing I'd like to say is I'm very honored to be working with the quality of speakers that I've heard already, and I think I'll hear as the evening goes on and as the class goes on. As Melissa said, Elisa and I are going to be talking about fire department organization for dealing with pregnancy in the workplace. And I'll start by saying that, I'll start by talking just for a minute about me. I was saved from the clutches of a legal career by becoming a volunteer firefighter 2 years before I started law school. But having gone through the training, I thought I was going to be a tax lawyer, but that's like watching paint dry. And in the fire service, the kind of law you deal with is public employment law. And it was always amazing to me to watch fire departments and fire chiefs around the country really proceed in ignorance in dealing with issues like pregnancy. We have fire departments that have been telling pregnant women firefighters, you're off the line until after the baby comes. And that's been illegal for a long time. That didn't take the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act to make that a wrong-headed way of managing. But our approach to the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act and how the fire department works is pre-planning. Pre-planning works. We all use it. What does it involve? Getting people together and talking about how you would handle a situation that hasn't occurred yet. And I'm here to tell you from personal experience that if you wait for a pregnancy event in your fire department, then you're going to be starting behind the curve. What you need to do is, in the words of the Blues Brothers, get the band together before there are any pregnancies or any need for invoking the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act or the Pump Act and dealing with nursing mothers. That means that the chief is involved. If you have a collective bargaining unit, they're involved. If you have people who might have accommodation opportunities, for example, fire code enforcement or fire prevention, training, or if you're up for it and you can work it out, you can invite some of your peers and see what accommodation opportunities might be available in other local government departments. That's all fair game. So rule number one is get the group together and start talking about those possibilities. Because as a training officer, I hated it when somebody came to me and said, oh, hey, we've got somebody that needs to go on light duty. Put them to work. Well, if you tell me about that in advance, I'll think of some creative things for them to do that'll be important as opposed to boxing paper clips. The second thing that you need to do is make sure when you do learn of a firefighter pregnancy, and by the way, if any of you out there have a rule in your department that says you are required to report your pregnancy to your fire chief, bad idea. It costs a nursing home chain, I think, $800,000 in the Chicago area for having that rule. Basically, what you need to do is furnish an environment, and you can do that with that pre-planning group that encourages people who are pregnant to come forward as soon as they can. Because your next step is making sure that the nurse midwife, OBGYN doc, whoever it is that the firefighter is working with, knows something about what firefighters do. You would probably not be surprised to learn that doctors don't know very much about what firefighters do, other than if they grew up watching Emergency. And the third point is to be ready to discuss reasonable accommodation options. Don't close your mind. The intent of the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act is to get people to communicate face to face and talk about what their options are. And there's always more than one possibility. And finally, and this is where you need cooperation of the group, it's almost inevitable in a fire department that you'll have knucklehead conduct or attempts at it, and you need to deal with that in advance. And the way that I found that's an effective way to do that is, again, before somebody announces a pregnancy, to have station meetings and say, pregnancies occur, you may have to deal with helping your wife if you're a male firefighter and she's pregnant. If you're a woman firefighter, you may be dealing with pregnancy yourself, and we need to be prepared to support all of the firefighters in dealing with pregnancy situations. By the way, one of the things I said, I think at the beginning, was you need to really know the rules. Right now, EEOC has fairly recently put some useful information on their website, but at our presentation, we'll be talking about what a lot of other organizations are doing, and there are some really astonishing resources out there. So that's part one. Part two is post-birth. In other words, once the baby is born, it ain't over. So you need to learn about what the post-birth issues are, know what the law is regarding protection of firefighters after a child is born, understand the effects, the continuing effects that the pregnancy and the childbirth will have on the woman, and the fact that it's unreasonable to expect that in the context of the pioneers and the settlers, that you're going to have a woman firefighter ready to come back to work the day after the baby's born. That's ridiculous. But again, if you establish that and pre-plan it in advance so people know what to expect, both in terms of a pregnant woman firefighter and folks in the organization, then you'll have a much smoother time. If you've got a firefighter on leave of absence, that leave of absence may need to be extended beyond childbirth. And once again, accommodation is critical here. Regular communication with the mother is critical, and I don't think it's necessary that the chief have to do it. As a matter of fact, sometimes it may be more effective if you have a department liaison assigned to work with that firefighter, and they can chat periodically and contact you if there are issues that you need to resolve. So that's what we're going to be covering, and our focus is going to be on effective response in the fire department to a firefighter pregnancy so that there's success all the way around.
John, I have a question that's kind of a little bit off topic, but so we're talking about firefighter pregnancy policies and such. Do the police departments have as much? I mean, we're in 2024 and we're still talking about departments that don't have pregnancy policies, that have females that work in those agencies.
The Pregnant Workers Fairness Act applies to everybody, including local government employees. So that's, if you're the police chief, I'll make a deal with you. We can talk about what light duty or reasonable accommodation opportunities there are in the police department. And at the same time, we can help each other develop plans so that we have consistency and we know we're on the right track. I found that it was interesting. Lisa and I tried to convince the International City Managers Association that having a brief workshop on this for city managers would be a really useful thing. And unfortunately, they didn't agree. But if you really want to have it work powerfully, then involve your city attorney's office, your city manager or mayor, and human resources. But when you actually do the policy in your own department, you're doing it with your folks, with folks that these women work with every day. But it's not a surprise to me. Some fire departments are still having issues, and some police departments and other organizations are. It takes a while for the word to get out. Remember that famous saying in the military? He just didn't get the word.
And I would think and I could be totally off base here, but the police might not have as much issues with pregnancy in there because the police department doesn't work 24 hours. So I think having the fire department work 24 hours, or even like I think some East Coast state departments still work 12 hours, probably takes into a whole nother realm of issues with the policies and such that should be in place that really aren't in place. It's just
It
kind of
probably does. And another example is it's not hard to find a uniform that will accommodate a pregnancy. But if you've looked lately at how long it takes to get turnout gear delivered to you after you order it, if a woman wants to continue firefighting and her OBGYN or nurse midwife agrees, that can continue on into the third trimester. And you might see somebody having issues with turnout gear that fits. I've been telling people that might not work as a reasonable accommodation simply because of the impossibility of getting turnout gear before the end of the pregnancy. So that's one that my advice to people is just play it by ear.
Thanks, John. Does anyone have any questions for John?
Can I pop in on that real quick? I had a little experience with a local police department and a fire department with me in my new county role. They invited me in with their city manager to talk about the PWFA and the Pump Act. And it was a very progressive meeting, and they wanted to get ahead of all this, and so we're working on a policy with that. But as far as a police officer, she is going to, when she becomes pregnant, she does face the risk factors she faces are a little bit different for her. And so like things like pursuits and altercations, the more physical aspects of her job, and then also what she's exposed to when it comes to things like shooting at a range and the lead exposure. It's a little bit different. And so looking at it from that aspect of what her exposures are going to be are not quite the same as what a firefighter is going to be exposed to, but they're still first responders and they still have some of the same aspects of the job. So figuring out if maybe their accommodation is going to be maybe dispatching or something along those lines. But just a little blurb on that.
And there is one other area of controversy. First of all, if you're a state employee in the state of Texas, the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act doesn't apply to you right now because you have wacky judges down there who enjoined enforcement of it. But the other area where there's some controversy is the fact that if you choose to have an abortion, that's considered an event related to pregnancy. And the EEOC was very clear in saying that that kind of activity deserved the same protections that a continuing pregnancy does. And that's being challenged, but at this point, there are no injunctions or anything saying that does not apply in all 50 states, except for those unlucky employees of the state of Texas. No offense, Texas.
So real quick, Melissa or John, does it seem like pregnancy policies and getting lactation policies in place and such it seems like it's more in the forefront now, or has it always just been in the forefront and we're just hearing about it now more because more females, even though it's only 4% females in the fire service, are we just hearing about it more because firefighters are getting more pregnancies in the fire department, or has it always been an issue? Because I don't know, I can't wrap my head around that it's 2024 and we're still talking about that departments don't have pregnancy policies and what should we do when a female firefighter gets pregnant. And I mean, I guess on the flip side of that is like we still celebrate that the department hired their first female too. But I mean, you would think that like John talked about pre-planning. So does it just seem like it's more in the forefront now, or has it always been there and it's just gaining more steam, or because of the laws that have gone into effect?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the things I'm really excited about this conference for, and I really hope moving forward, one of my goals for us to be able to do is to start shifting the narrative on this, because there's a lot of misinformation out there about firefighting and pregnancy and breastfeeding. And again, it's not just women that are affected by reproductive health, because they're infertile too. Their sperm counts are lower from being a firefighter. And so I want to be able to get out there and do that. But I think that with the advent of, and this is just my perception, in my opinion, I think with the advent of social media has given people the avenue to be able to talk about, hey, this is what's going on. I'm pregnant and my department is telling me this, or I'm pregnant and my chief is telling me that, right? And you're like, I'm reading through these things and I'm going, oh, no. So we're really, this is a gap that we're going to be able to bridge. And I feel like with the team that we've got on board right now, we're going to be able to bridge it very well with the thorough education, and get it out there on a national level. So that's my feeling.
Thanks.
I think Melissa's hit the nail on the head. Just a couple of other observations. One, in parallel with the increase in women in the fire service is also a parallel increase in knowledge of legal protections for pregnancy. Again, pregnancy in the workplace has been protected since the late 1970s, but you'd never know it by looking at some of the lawsuits filed against fire chiefs who told their pregnant firefighters, go home and have the baby and don't bother me until then. And in a lot of organizations, I shouldn't say that, I don't know that. In some organizations, I think there's been a pretty powerful, I'm not sure if peer influence is the right word, but an expectation that a pregnant firefighter needs to be off the line. And the way that I approached it was really very simple. People would ask me about it, and I'd say, do I look like a physician? And when I really want to be mean to fire chiefs, I'll tell them to pretend they're on a witness stand, and then I'll ask them where they got their MD and where they did their OBGYN internship and residency and what makes them an expert on it. And usually they quiet down a little bit and understand it. So that's the ignorant fire chief is kind of up there with the physician that doesn't know what firefighters do. So that's part of the job. I think the last part is the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act was the first piece, I think, first significant piece of civil rights legislation in a number of years. And it got a lot of national attention as it made its way through the legislative process. But it's hard to believe that it's been out and about for almost 2 years now and people are still figuring it out.
Thanks, John, Melissa, for answering that. Deborah, do you want to go next or?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Deborah Fearheller. You can call me Deb. You can call me Debbie, Deborah, whatever. Just don't call me late for dinner. Lisa, thank you so much for inviting me and for allowing us to have this time to chat. I'm super excited for this conference. I was at the FDIC conference, one of the ones when the Women in Fire was there, and what a great experience. Super great opportunity to champion women, champion female firefighters, and integrate with the science, the technology, everything that we have that, the NFPA and the US Fire Administration puts forward is just awesome. John, I love what you said, and I totally agree. These seminars all sound incredible and formidable, and I'm humbled to be here. As Melissa said, we're going to put advocacy for women at the forefront, and I'm going to do the same thing. I am a physiologist by training. I work as a teaching and research professor, and my research has been in cardiovascular risk reduction for 20 years. I'm an exercise physiologist, and so I absolutely advocate and educate for how we should and how we could increase exercise and how we can effectively exercise to improve our health and to reduce our cardiac risk. I'm an avid performance nutrition specialist, and I teach a course on chronic disease and nutrition. But more important to today and to the conference, I've been a volunteer firefighter for just over 10 years. So I know the job and I know the risks associated to it. And when I became a volunteer firefighter, I left my first house fire and I was like, holy shit, my heart is going to explode. So then I really started to do, I don't know, I'm sorry, maybe I shouldn't have sworn. You'll bleep that out.
It's all good.
But I was like, wow, there's a serious issue with blood pressure and heart rate. And so I spent years doing research on blood pressure regulation, blood pressure responses in firefighters. Just last year, I personally was diagnosed myself with heart disease. And this forced me to evaluate the literature on female heart health, on female athlete hearts, and on the clinical care of females. And I got to tell you, it's crazy how much in the infancy we really are with this. Before the 1990s, which is not that long ago, women were rarely included in clinical trials and rarely included in research studies, despite accounting for, what are we, more than half the global population, and we outnumber men. Even though ignoring females in research, though, we historically have overlooked the fact that the physiology of a female is different than the physiology of a male, and therefore ignoring the fact that clinical treatment and clinical care approach should be different for the female compared to the male. But today, like, I do think we're at a tipping point. There's an increased cognizance of gender inequality everywhere, and the importance of inclusiveness and diverse approaches are, being talked about and championed in medical research, and actually to anything in society, right? And that's kind of the discussion norm now. So when we get back to research, though, you look at it and women are undervalued, we're underdiagnosed, undertreated, and under-researched. Now, I mean, this all sounds like my seminar is going to be this horrible negative, but it's really not, right? Despite policy changes, women still are underrepresented. There's been a study that came out that looked at clinical trials from the 2016 to 2019 era, and they found that women were only 41% of the participants in these clinical trials. And this is like actually even worse for women of color. So I think there's like, we need to champion this dialogue, and we need to get people comfortable talking about female health. The other problem is that when we tease out the science, and if you ever actually get in and start to look at the literature, research are factoring for sex, and but they're not actually comparing males and females, and they're not actually looking at what is happening in the physiology of a female. So I guess the simplest thing I could say is think about the blood pressure guidelines, right? We all run EMS calls, we measure blood pressure, right? And so we think about what is the high blood pressure, how's blood pressure responding, how's our patient, and what are the guidelines for diagnosis of hypertension? And that SPRINT trial set that threshold at 120 millimeters of mercury to reduce cardiovascular events. Those SPRINT trial those SPRINT trial studies were conducted in multiple sites across the United States. And they found, and they included in their trials overall about 60% men and only about 40% women. But because there were so few women in the trial, they didn't really separate the data when they compared it. So they just analyzed everything together, and they said that 120 millimeters of mercury is where we're going to say the threshold is. But there was a group of women and cardiologists who actually analyzed the data, and they found that women aren't as protected from events at this blood pressure level as men are. So, I mean, that's just the kind of simple example that I can give you that we all think about when we think about measuring blood pressure. But across the board, clinical diagnosis and protocols and clinical guidelines have been, designed for men and following studies that were primarily including men. And they've been applied as kind of a one size fits all for women. And it's funny, John, you talk about turnout gear that fits. I remember when I first started, as a volunteer, I was in a rural fire department in Pennsylvania, and they're like, here's an old pair of turnout gear. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I can't even crawl in this. It doesn't fit. So it's the same kind of thing we're doing with treatment of patients. We're kind of I know personally clinicians that I work with and collaborate with, they extrapolate their care for women based on the guidelines that are driven by these male-centric studies. But at the same time, we know there's differences in sex and health that would transfer to the firefighter occupational health considerations, including differences in pain management, how we feel pain, hormonal changes to the body and brain that are different between the men and women, among other factors that contribute to that complex interplay when we think about the differences between sex and gender, when we think about those constructs. But in terms of cardiac health, because that's my passion, you can probably tell I'm super passionate about it. Cardiovascular disease is the leading cause of mortality across the world, and it still remains the leading cause of death in women. But women, we present with symptoms differently. And I got to tell you, it's a scary fact that 2/3 of females who die of a heart attack actually don't have chest pain. And there's a study from it was a national hospital survey, and the data from that is super compelling. And they found that women, if you show up at the doctor or you show up at the hospital and you're saying, I have symptoms, you wait about 10 minutes longer to be evaluated in the ER. You are less likely to be triaged or to be evaluated in the ER. You're less likely to be triaged as an emergent case. You're more likely to be told, oh, it's something emotional, or, oh, you have some sort of digestive issue. You're less likely to actually even receive cardiac monitoring or get an EKG. And in fact, you're even less likely to be seen by some sort of consulting physician or a cardiologist. So this is scary, but it's very true. And so because of this, the disease progresses, it's undiagnosed, and therefore the outcomes for females are worse. So again, national agencies are starting to recognize this. And so, like I said, we're kind of at a tipping point. So this is where I'm super excited to get out, and my research team and I, we're advocating for it, running workshops everywhere. I'm trying to get as many seminars as possible, just start this dialogue and let us be comfortable talking about it, right? It's our time finally. There was just a recent report in the end of June from the American Heart Association, and it was the McKinsey Health Institute and the AHA combined their data, their analysis together, and they found that if we invest efforts to improve women's health, we could actually add 1.6 million health quality years and boost the US economy by, I think it was like something like $28 billion by 2040. So, I mean, those are just statistics, but this is just one of the things that like we can champion. The AHA has the Go Red for Women initiative, and they just released a venture capital fund to invest in actual companies that serve women's health needs across their lifespan. The White House has their initiative for women's health research. The American Physiology Association just created a task force for this. So the Fire Administration and Women in Fire, we partnered in 2019 and released that Emerging Health and Safety Issues Among Women in the Fire Service report. And that's a great report. It's a nice handbook. Chapter 4 actually covered heart health in general terms. It gives some outline on specific needs of women and risk and discuss the general terms, but it doesn't talk about risks specific to women. So that's where my seminar is going to be like super important and valuable for, you know, hopefully educating some of the females across the country and internationally, females and males. We have specific risk factors. My research team, like I said, we advocate for them. We spend time teaching women. We let them talk about them. We let them learn about them. And I got to tell you, pregnancy is life's natural stress test. As an exercise physiologist, we stress test people to get their, you know, their fitness level. But when you think about cardiac risk factors, a lot of them actually are adverse pregnancy outcomes. So I love hearing these other seminars that are going to be offered that are relating to pregnancy and how do we plan for pregnancy and how do we care for pregnant women and pregnant firefighters and how do we deal with that as they progress through their pregnancy and after pregnancy. The perinatal and postnatal time period is so important. I plan to discuss specific cardiac risk factors. We're going to have kind of an interactive exchange. Anyone who attends my seminar will get to calculate their risk. They'll get to learn about specific sex-specific risk factors. We're actually going to discuss differences in female hearts, physiological differences, comparing them from females to males. I'm a teacher, so of course we're going to like talk about like actually learning the physiology. And not only in the structure of the heart, but in the function of the heart. And the reason I'm doing that is because we can think about it. And when we're running EMS calls, we need to really think about our, you know, our female patients aside from our peers. We're going to discuss cardiovascular risk factors in relation to blood pressure and blood pressure response in firefighters. We're going to talk about cardiac risk factors specific to female firefighters. How can we prevent heart disease? How can we increase that dialogue? How can we advocate for ourselves, for our peers, for our patients? So the other thing I'm going to talk about is central blood pressure. I think that's a critical piece of the tool, and I think that's the future of blood pressure measurement and the future of blood pressure guidelines. There's new tools coming out in the market that are going to be released sometime, you know, whenever the supply chain improves. And they have the capability to do home blood pressure monitoring to measure central blood pressure. So medication that's designed to reduce blood pressure is designed to reduce the blood pressure at your heart. But we measure peripheral blood pressure, right? We measure blood pressure in the arm. So I think that all of these guidelines and all of these measurements that we're looking at are looking at the peripheral blood pressure. I think central blood pressure is a critical piece of the tool. So I'm going to like talk about some data that we've looked at that has central blood pressure and measures central blood pressure. We have an ongoing clinical cardiac screening study that we're doing in women that we're looking at blood pressure and we're measuring central blood pressure. I think it's a really important piece of the tool, and I think it's something that we're going to keep that discussion going. I also believe women athlete hearts respond to stress differently. We respond to exercise or work-related stress differently than male hearts. Nobody's looking into this. Nobody has looked at female athlete hearts at all. As firefighters, I believe we are tactical athletes. And especially if we're working and responding from an active house, our heart is under stress. And we need to understand what is happening in the female heart that's different than the male heart. So I think it's really important to champion this discussion and keep it going. Like I said, we have an ongoing research study, but we are in Southern California. So anyone that's in the area, happy to, you know, have that discussion. If you come to my seminar, we can talk about it. Otherwise, you know, it is a research study, so it's kind of under the umbrella of research. So you get free cardiac screening. It's non-punitive, it's confidential. We give everyone all of their information. And then we have the workshops that we offer that kind of go hand in hand with the study that offer that education component. But I'm excited to come into the actual Women in Fire conference and offer the educational seminar and increase that dialogue and start to get to meet some of you in person as well.
Deborah, I have a quick question. So I just recently retired, but where I worked, we used to have every year they do blood work and your blood pressure, and
Yeah.
for a while they would do body index or body mass weight, and that stopped. But so after you reached 40, every other year you had to do a treadmill stress test. So were they like when they do those, I don't know if you know this, or it might be department specific, are they just using like the male when they're doing the female and the male, are they just using do they just have one thing they're looking at on those, or is it males?
Yeah, so yeah, that's a great question. It's very department specific, right? And so when you think about the volunteer houses in particular, they don't even have that offered. The professional houses, yes, they have it, but it's going to be department specific. And the other thing to consider is, are they using an ECG when they do their stress test? Or are they not doing an ECG? Are they just doing an exercise stress test? The ECG is going to be a little more diagnostic for the cardiac health. The regular stress test is just going to give an idea of fitness. The interesting thing is there was a study that came out in 2021 and it looked at male and female cardiac health, and they found that this is in firefighters, and they found that there really wasn't a difference in fitness levels between the females and the male firefighters. So I find it interesting that, we can do these tests and use the male specific criteria because the studies were done mostly in men.
Thanks for that information. Does anyone have any questions?
Lisa,
Yes, sir.
yeah, I just wanted to reassure Deborah that by not saying holy moly, she preserved her credibility as a firefighter.
Hey, cheers.
Okay, our next guest is Dr. Donnie Hutchinson.
Well, thank you, Lisa, and thanks for all the guests here and for our listeners out there. I'd like to do a quick wrap up. I mean, Travis, when you're talking about the leadership, where you're at currently as a leader and where you want to go as a leader, I thought it's perfectly right on where the spot, right? Where are we headed and all of that. Then Melissa, all of the women's health piece and your passion coming out, obviously with all that, is just absolutely, I just think people attract to that. You draw them in with that passion for the women's health. And then John talking about the pregnancy of firefighters, and not just for the female firefighters, but for the total family part of it as well, which is such of a huge challenge, I guess we should say, and opportunities. And then Deborah, as a teacher and professor and researcher and all of that, that's where the doctor on my name comes from. So it's from professor and researcher. And that's how you're all that, the cardiac, I didn't want to show my ignorance by asking, but I will ask, because there could be a listener out there in the audience right now is going, what is central blood pressure? So, okay, maybe I'm the only one that doesn't know what that is, but could you jump in and share that?
Oh, absolutely. So the central blood pressure is the blood pressure that occurs right at your heart, right at the aorta and the large vessels. And the only way that you can measure that is there's specific devices that are currently used mostly in research. There are some clinics that have them. In Southern California, I know the Cedars-Sinai Clinic, they have one, the Barbra Streisand Women's Heart Center. They have the SphygmoCor. We have the SphygmoCor. We use it in research. And there's a lot of other research centers that use it. And so that can actually measure your central blood pressure. It's different than the actual brachial blood pressure, peripheral blood pressure that you measure with the handheld device or the home monitors that you can buy in Walgreens or CVS. Can't say Rite Aid anymore. There's no more Rite Aids.
Yes. Well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Well, as for the listeners, I'm Dr. Donnie, and I think I've been around for a while in the fire service. So it's been 8 years since I did my first presentation, and I did that at the IAFF ALT. So it was the union leadership annual training, the educational that they bring the union leaders together, East Coast, West Coast. They go back and forth. Been doing it 8 years in a row now. And I do 2 workshops there each year. Very first workshop I did, there were 200 firefighters. And I will tell you, it was 198 men and 2 women, because it is very distinct. Okay. But since that time, there have been more women in the workshop. So it's nice to see those numbers. But when I did the workshop, my workshop is on work-life balance, and I call it more of it's turning into when I sit back and I really think about what am I really teaching in work-life balance? I'm teaching this term that I call proactive behavioral health, Because if we think of behavioral health, a lot of times we only think of mental health. But behavioral health is simply what choices do we make? And Travis, you talked about this in your leadership, day by day. What choices do we make day by day? And how does that affect all the roles in our life? And when I talk about work-life balance, I'm talking about simply, are your daily behaviors aligned with your priorities in life? Now, if you're a pregnant firefighter, I hope the priority, and I assume, is the child that's on its way, right? I mean, we know that's the natural instinct and all of that, as well as the partner, the father, perhaps other siblings, the life. Is it challenging when it comes to, because sometimes if I just throw out work-life balance, we think, oh, firefighters just don't have work-life balance. Let's not even think about that. But no, it's all in how you define work-life balance, because it's truly balance. In my research, in my studies, is about passionately pursuing excellence in your faith, family, health, and career. That's what I researched. And my academic piece goes into this thing called the self-care flourished living model, to where the greater we care for ourselves, the more effective we can be with our families and with our careers. Now, and in firefighting. And so from 8 years ago, when I did that very first workshop, then I got invited out to do some more, to, various union leaders invited me out to their departments. One thing just spilled into another. Earlier this year, I started the company called the First Responders Center for Balance and Well-Being. Brittany Hollerbach is on the board of advisors for that. Melissa, I think it was you that mentioned her name. Yes. And Brittany was so kind that Brittany picked up my youngest daughter, who's going to be my co-presenter at the Women in Fire conference. And she's a researcher for Brittany, a student researcher, if you will. And Hannah is actually heading out to Oxford University this fall to study underneath a couple psychologists that claim they have a PTSD prevention program. So I'm very excited to hear about that when she comes back from that. But she's coming out to present with me, and she's presented before with me. So I'm really looking forward to that. And I think I'm bringing another daughter to sit in the crowd and be a participant, because she needs some work-life balance. And Rachel, if you're listening, that's who I'm talking about, because I have another daughter too after that, the one at Vanderbilt. And then, of course, I have a wife, and I have a son that's Army combat veteran, Afghan war vet, and a 3-year professional firefighter.
Yes.
So do you think I'm concerned? Got the war. He's got the bracelets of his buddies, and he's got the firefighting. But so we have a passion for this. I'm an Army veteran, and I jumped into this, and I'll tell you real quick what the workshop's about. I do the workshop in 3 parts. Similar, Travis, to where you were talking about, is I do a workshop, I call it the current reality, is that we do reflection exercises and a lot of interactive stuff, because it's challenging. And is it more challenging for women in fire versus men in fire when it comes to work-life balance? I don't know. It'll be an interesting conversation. And does it matter if it's more challenging? Maybe they're both just so significantly challenged, it really doesn't matter which one's more. It's what can we do about it? What should we focus on? Because at the end of the day, we have time and we have energy. And those are the 2 things that get wiped out in a 24-hour shift. Your time's gone and your energy's gone. And then you have people back at the house wanting that from you. But we do the workshop we reflect on current reality. And then we use a workbook, and we're going to document, how are things going in your life with your spouse or significant other, with your children, with your work, with your physical health, with your mental health, with your social health, with your spiritual health. And then you document, you answer some questions in it. We have activities and talk about it, things like that. And then I take you through different reflection exercises. And then I take the group over to this thing I call desired future. How do you want things to be in your life in all those areas? right? And then you start documenting that down. And then again, we do some best practices like healthy habit stacking and self-forgiveness and different things like that to help us bridge the gap. And then the third part is we build a project plan. So we actually build a tactical plan to get us from current reality over to desired future. And you leave with that workbook, you put your most intimate thoughts down in it, you take it home, and you have a plan to go home and go to work with and use. So if that interests any of you out there, please join me in the class. I promise you it's going to be moving. I've been doing this for a long time. I know what the results are. If you have an interest in this, I hope to see you there.
Dr. Donnie, you said work-life balance, and I don't know if anyone could attest to this, but I know the younger generation of firefighters, it seems like they have a more work-life balance. And I could be speaking totally off the cuff here, like as far as like, if you look on any social media platform, follow any fire department, the amount of mandatory overtime there is and forced overtime, whatever you want to refer to it as, is and almost every agency is crazy right now. But I mean, I know when I was firefighter, it's like you would never hear anybody say, I don't want to work. Like, you want to work tomorrow? No, I don't want to work. No, oh yeah, I'll work. And they work, whatever the maximum amount of days they could work, and they'd work overtime all those days and not even think nothing about it. And now it seems like the younger generation of firefighter has that, no, I want to work the days I'm scheduled, and now I want to go home. So I don't know if it's the upbringing of them, or or can you like talk to that a little bit, maybe?
I can, yes. And I've written in the university textbooks on generational differences and cultural differences in this. And we see it. I understand. We definitely see it all the time. But it's more complex than just the simple answer, they don't want to work. Because when we look at work-life balance from the perspective that I teach, the total wellness, the proactive behavioral perspective, they may not be working, choose not to work, but they're home on thumbing through social media, and they're not paying attention to their 2-year-old or 4-year-old.
Yeah.
Now, is that balance? I'm not here to be a judge, but generally that doesn't, kids need time with parents.
Yeah.
If you're the caretaker of that day. Or they're not, the younger generation they're not coming into the fire service as strong physically or mentally. From a mental fitness perspective, they're not coming into it as strong. So they're not taking this extra time to work on these proactive behavioral health behaviors. And that's where we want to, when I go into a department, I talk with the chiefs before I do the training to find out, of course, their history of a lot of different things. But then part of that is that, hey, who's working the overtime? And it's like, yeah, the same 20% of firefighters are working the overtime all the time. But I try to take it to get all the crews and the whole department to understand is that I'm not just talking about an individual health balance. I'm talking about a department balance. The only way we're going to be able to get a department in better balance is we need some of the people that are not working to step up and work. And those that are taking all the overtime, hey, share it. A little bit and go home and work on these other things that you're avoiding. And let's just be honest with each other. We know they're avoiding. They know they don't do this. So, you can fill those gaps with other things. But at the end of life, when we look back, how many people look back and say, oh, I wish, would have, could have, should have, whether it's our physical health, whether it's our family relationships, and a lot of different areas. So what I try to do is really get people to zero in. So when I talk about aligning your daily behaviors with your priorities in life, a lot of times, and then I'll ask a question, hey, when's the last time you really sat down and had a very good talk with yourself about what your priorities are? And people just stare. It's like, no, we get running so fast in our careers that time flies. Our kid that was this tall is now taller than us. Time flies. So I try to take people into almost like a group hypnotic position to where we're going to take time out in life and we're going to reflect on this stuff. And you're going to, in this state, you're going to document your true feelings that you have for yourself and what you want out of this life. Because I'm here to treat you. We're all proud, whether I'm teaching firefighters, police officers, but when I come into the room at this event, you're all human beings to me, and I'm a human being to you. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to reach that humanistic perspective within us with a firefighter slant, of course, with your shift work and everything that you have. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that answer, actually. So, does anyone have anything they'd like to add or comment on? So, like we've heard from our the speakers that we had today, we have some really good innovative classes at this upcoming conference. And today we just talked about our classroom sessions, but we do have hands-on training on the 11th and 12th, like I mentioned, that'll be held at the SanDiego training division, and they will actually transport you from the Westin Hotel to the training division. And some of them are like search and rescue, ground ladder ventilation, vehicle extrication, rope rescue, ladder skills, rescuing the downed firefighter, nozzle forward, which is always a very popular class. First do size ups. So there's actually a science to the station, an AM workshop that's going to talk about social media, on occupational stressors for firefighter, behavioral research for women in the fire service, lessons learned, and opportunities to seize morale, injury, peeling back the layers of PTSD, and rethinking first responder mental illness. And that's one of the workshops actually on the second day that'll be actually at the hotel. So I want to actually thank my guests for being part of the radio show. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules and to tell us about your class that you'll be teaching. Thanks to Fire Engineering again. Thanks to all the listeners and members of Women Fire. And remember to listen and follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and to check out our website, womeninfire.org, which actually has all the information about our conference on there, the agendas listed on there, how to register, where the host hotel is, and everything. So I'm really excited about the upcoming conference. And I want to thank my fantastic panel. As you can see, these classes are fantastic. I'm looking forward to going to a few of them myself. So again, thank you for being part of the radio show.
This episode of Fire Engineering Podcast is sponsored by LogRX, providing real-time accountability of all your narcotics from cradle to grave. Coming soon, LogRX will also track medical supplies, equipment, PPE, and even vehicle checks. Learn a better way to track your narcotics at logrx.com. That's LOGRX.com.
Like a trusted turnout jacket you've had for years, Flex 7 outer shell fabric delivers a perfectly broken-in feel on the very first wear. Flexible, comfortable, and powered with the strength of enforced technology, Flex 7 outer shell fabric is made to move. To learn more, visit tencatafabrics.com/flex7. Flex 7, powered by enforced technology. Only from TenCate Protective Fabrics.